when we got to Phoenix. But it did get better. A little. All right. So what have we been studying? Sister Helen, we should ask you all the questions since you've been out for a little while. We're so glad to have you back again today. And we're celebrating by having a food day. And yep. I know Brother Mike has an appetite. We asked him to hold off for a week. Starved himself all week, fasted. Well, maybe not. Okay. Okay, so what are we studying? We're studying Psalms. What else do we know? By 5 different people. So there are 150 Psalms, and there's at least 7 composers. King David was one that did about half of them. The sons of Korah, which were in the Levites, the tribe of the Levites, they wrote 10. They were part of Israel in Moses' time. Asaph wrote 12. He was a prominent Levite singer and was in David's court. Solomon wrote some of the Psalms. I don't think we've gotten to those yet. Moses also wrote at least one. Heman, also from the sons of Korah. He was likely a songwriter and musician that worked with King David. And then Ethan was the one that came at the end. Oh, sorry, got that wrong. Ethan helped write some of it. He was the one that was involved in bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. And then Ezra was thought to be the author of some, and also the person that put it all into the Psalms. And so they wouldn't have been all collected together in one place if somebody hadn't done that. And Ezra did that. So we have a period of anywhere from 900 to 1,000 years for the period of the Psalms. So they're thought to be organized into 5 books total. And we've already studied the first book, which is Psalms 1 through 41, which corresponds to Genesis. That's where they spoke of man and his relationship to God. God was mostly identified as Yahweh. This is the name of redemption, and that section dealt with God's willingness and ability to ransom people. Book 2 is where we are right now. It's Psalms 42 to 72, and that corresponds to the Exodus. And the name most often used for God is Elohim. This is the name of power. It is through God's power that people can be brought out of bondage to sin and set on the path of righteousness. These Psalms will draw attention to God, who has the power to help in time of need. He is to be the longing of the soul. And we see some Psalms in Book 2, in fact, I think there's one that looks almost identical to the one in Book 1, which highlights that even though time passes, our relationship with the Lord and our trust in the Lord and the way our relationship with the Lord should be the same. It doesn't change over time. The expectations God has for us, how we should behave, how we should trust in Him, how we should live our lives is pretty much the same through the Bible. Today we're looking at Psalms 57 through 61, so that sounds like a lot. There's 5. The good news is it's only 59 total verses. So it sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. So we have 11, 11, 17, 12, and 8. That's pretty easy. So we appreciate the easy ones. Easy in terms of numbers of verses. Doesn't necessarily mean easy in terms of getting through all the material. It can be just as challenging getting through 59 verses. Okay. So why are we studying the Psalms? Why is it part of the Bible, and why are we studying it today, so many years later? Mhm. It is. It's a message from God to us that's just as applicable today as it was then. And we see messages in here every week that we can and should trust God throughout our whole lives. We see a lot of examples of David. Was David a person that was pretty much slow and steady through the whole entire time, and no challenges or issues or anything happened in his life? It was kind of boring. Or what was it like for David? Sometimes it was chaos. So what kind of chaos did he have, Brother Homer? He did. He had King Saul that was after him. And so when you have another regular person after you, that's bad enough by itself. But when you have a king of a country that is after you, what's the difference? Right. Everyone in that country subjection to that king. And when the king puts the word out, go find this person, that's what people do. And so if you think about it, sort of in modern times, whatever, Saul said, I want David. And usually with that was some expectation of a reward, some expectation of some bounty, whether it was money or power or both, was the expectation for the person that was able to bring David to Saul. And so they were basically bounty hunters. So he had the whole entire country after him. And we can't even imagine how that would be if you were there when I was growing up. They'd put your picture in the post office, and people would see it when they went to the post office. Nobody goes to the post office anymore unless they absolutely have to, I guess. So you don't really look at that stuff. But sometimes it'll show up on TV or whatever, look for this person, or you'll get a alert on your phone that says, some child got kidnapped, look for this car and call the police if you see it, kind of thing. But it doesn't show somebody's picture. It doesn't say when you see this person, there's Joe Biden has a reward for him or whatever for you. So this was a huge amount of pressure. What else happened in David's life? He had a lot of battles, a lot of wars. He had wars with neighboring countries that were perceiving him to be weak, and he prevailed in those situations so much that it was sort of beyond their understanding that he was able to prevail upon them. He also had strife within the country. He had strife within his family. And so you're out fighting against the enemies that are outside your borders or trying to get in or whatever. That's pretty easy to unify a country in those situations. But what about when your family's divided? What about when your family is off doing their own things? In fact, you even have a son that's trying to unseat you from power. And so that's the enemies without and the enemies within. And David had both of those to contend with during his life, plus many other things. He was married. Did all of his wives agree with him? Do all of our wives agree with us? Not really. There you go. And then sometimes it gets either at least one of us in trouble. Sometimes both. But David had trouble with his wives in terms of following the Lord. And so there were challenges related to that too. So last week, we had studied where Saul had more or less put the word out that David needed to be captured. And so David fled Jerusalem, and he fled Saul, and he had gone to Gath, which was the people of Goliath. That would seem to be the last place you would go for help, but that's where he went because he was afraid for his life. And he appealed to the king there. And then he started acting like he was mentally crazy or something. And so the king said, well, there's no real need to do anything with him because he's crazy. And so David realized he needed to get out of there. So he did. So now we are all the way up to Psalm 57. Just like that. Okay, so Psalm 57 is 11 verses. Would someone like to read Psalm 57? Thank you, Sister Joyanne. So what's happening in this psalm? So he's running away from Saul, and David likes music. David writes music, he plays music, he sings to himself, he sings to everybody. Wherever he is, he sings. And so that's one of his gifts. And here we see one of his Psalms where he's talking about his situation when he's fleeing from Saul. And in this particular case, he feels like he's alone. He's on the run. People are trying to kill him. People are trying to hurt him. People are setting traps for him. And I don't think I've ever been exactly in this situation before that David's been in. Maybe I felt like I was, but I haven't been in this situation. David is not complaining to the Lord. He is seeking the Lord's help. He is recognizing his situation. David is really self-aware. He sees his situation for what it is, and he knows that he cannot prevail by himself. He knows that. He knows he can't get away from everybody everywhere trying to come after him. The only way that he can even live is with God's help. And so he starts out here, be merciful unto me, O God. Be merciful unto me. For my soul trusteth in thee, yea, in the shadow of thy wings will I make my refuge until these calamities be overpast. What is he talking about in the shadow of the wings? Protection. So have you ever seen a bird sitting on a nest? First they're sitting on the nest, and then there's a bunch of eggs. And then those eggs hatch, and they turn into little birds. There's a lot of noise. When there's little birds are in there, there's a lot of noise. Those birds are, if you have one of those nests like right by your window on your house, you're going to hear those little birds all the time because they are hungry or thirsty or they want something. And we're like those little birds. That's how the Lord looks at us. We're like those little birds. We have needs. We have things that we want. In this case, very graphically, David is saying, in the shadow of thy wings will I make my refuge until these calamities be overpast. So these birds rely on their mother, their parent, to keep them from harm. And David is saying the same thing, is where the Lord is keeping him protected from all the things that are coming to threaten him. I will cry unto God Most High, and to God that performeth all things for me. He shall send from heaven and save me from the reproach of him that would swallow me up. Selah. God shall send forth his mercy and his truth. So David knows he's the anointed king of the Hebrews. At this point, he was anointed, but he wasn't anointed as the king yet. But he was still anointed by the priest. And he knew that he was going to trust in the Lord. He's been trusting in the Lord his whole life for all the things that he's done. And here he is asking God to send forth his mercy and his truth. My soul is among lions. So what does David know about lions? Well, he killed one when he was a shepherd. I think the example you're talking about is Daniel in the lion's den. But for David, he knows about lions. Lions are wild animals. When we go to see a lion, where do we go to see a lion? Yeah, there's bars in between us and them. And so we're protected. And so a lot of brave people will walk up to the cage and do whatever, or say things, or you're not so tough, or little kids especially might do that at the zoo. You see that sort of thing. When I was overseas, they also have zoos, but they do like a chicken wire thing. You don't feel as safe with chicken wire. And so I forgot exactly what it was, but I saw somebody poking an animal with a stick through the chicken wire. And I thought, that's not the best idea. You know, you trusting a lot that this flimsy fence is going to keep you protected. I don't trust as much in that fence as that person did. And so David knows about lions, just like we know about things we see every single day or all the time, whatever. They're the most fearsome animal that's out there in their time. And if you see a lion or hear a lion, probably hungry, probably ready to do something. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, pretty much you look like fellowship meal for that lion. So David knows that these people that are coming against him are focused, they're fierce, they know exactly what they're doing. They've done this to other people. It's not the first time they've gone after somebody. This is what these people do. These are experienced people. They know what they're doing. And I lie even among them that are set on fire, even the sons of men, whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword. So he's saying a lot in one verse there about those that are set on fire. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So which one of the chicks are we? Are we the chicks that are seeking God and God's help? Or is God offering us his protection, offering to help take care of us and help us with what we need every single day? But we're not listening. We're not paying attention. In fact, we might even be rejecting God. There's a lot of people just reject God outright. God has nothing to do with me. They act like there is no God even in some cases. And so our reliance on the Lord is what he expects from us. And I've been jumping around in my notes all over the place this morning. Thank you, Brother Mike, because I jumped over that part of it. But he expects us to follow him and to trust in him because he wants to give us that protection. He wants to give us that support. He wants to help us to be successful. If we follow his will and we follow his commandments and we're righteous in what we do, the Lord will help us. He says he will help us. And we're not praying to a statue like many that worship idols or worship other gods or goddesses or whatever it is. When we pray to the Lord listens to us, and often he answers our prayers. Sometimes he doesn't answer it directly. Sometimes we see an answer that's different than what we expected sometimes, but that's how the Lord works. I mentioned earlier about people trying to gain riches and power from King Saul by going after David. It kind of makes me think today, if you ever go to the gas station, what do you hear when you go into a gas station? Is anybody in there buying lottery tickets? Have you ever gone into a gas station when somebody wasn't buying lottery tickets? They're buying lottery tickets because they think that money and power are going to solve their problems. They think that if I just win however many billion it is, their life's going to be awesome. They're not going to have any problems or worries. Everything's going to be great. And some of the people that are after David in this case are thinking along the same lines. They're out for themselves. They're not after what the Lord wants. They're not after the Lord's will. They probably didn't even ask the Lord for what is his will. They weren't seeking God's will. They were seeking their own the whole entire time. Here we see in verse 6 that the people that are coming after him are setting traps. So if you're gonna catch somebody or catch anything, what does it mean to set a trap? What does that mean? Yeah. You're definitely plotting against them, right? Do you ever feel like somebody's trying to get you to say something wrong or do something wrong? Luring you into it? Sometimes. I feel like that sometimes. I've even asked somebody at work, is this person baiting me into just saying something or doing something? They said, yes, they definitely are. I'm like, okay, good. When you recognize that that's happening, it's easier to defend against it and to trust in the Lord and to be humble. And the Lord will help us get through those situations. As far as the traps, people that hunt other people, or even hunters in general, they know the behavior of what they're going after. They know who, in the case of David, they knew who his family is. They knew who his friends were. They knew who he trusted. It was pretty obvious. When you walk into a city, where do you go? They knew all those things. So when he said they put traps in place for him, they knew exactly what someone would do, and they were setting traps intended to capture David. David knew that he stood no chance against people like that, so he pleaded for God for help. And notice how specific David is in his request. And this is something I noticed from studying the Psalms that I didn't notice when we were studying Samuel and Chronicles and all that. David doesn't just say, Lord, help me. He says, confound my enemies. You know, in this case, he says, let them fall victim to their own traps. And so he's very specific about what he asked for. Kind of made me think about, you ever set a mouse trap and you're trying to get everything all situated and everything and get it all set, and then because you didn't do something correctly, it snaps, and you might have got your finger, you might not have got your finger, you might almost have gotten your finger. But that's what David is wishing on the people that are after him. Whatever trap they're trying to set for him, he's asking that the trap that they set for him, that it would actually be sprung on them. So he's turning it around the other way. So he's saying, whatever they intended to happen to me, I would like it to happen to them. And that's what he's praying for. So if they were trying to paint David as a traitor to Israel, if they're trying to lie and misrepresent him, in that case, he's saying, let them be represented in a way that's unfavorable to those that are around him. And so there's a lot of different things that David is asking for help on. And the bottom line of all of it, it is a song. And so this is something that's repeated over and over again through time. David repeated it over and over again. This was more before he was even ruling over the Hebrews. But it was here as part of the Psalms that they sang all the time. So he sang this to other people and with other people to help them understand the situation that he was in, and how in the situation that he was in that seemed hopeless, he trusted in the Lord, and the Lord got him through it. Okay, we only have 4 more. Okay, Psalm 58. Would somebody like to read 11 verses there? Thank you, Brother Homer. So here David is talking about unrighteous judges and calls for their swift destruction so that the righteous can rejoice in God's justice. In the beginning, he's saying, do you indeed speak righteousness, O congregation? Do you judge uprightly, O ye sons of men? Yea, in heart ye work wickedness, ye weigh the violence of your hands in the earth. And so he's talking about people that are rulers or people in a position of judging others that are not seeking righteousness, and they're not seeking the Lord's way. They're actually doing it a completely different way than that. The wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. And so he's saying that these people have had these traits since they were born. Sin nature, but a sin nature that's given to wickedness. Verse 4, their poison is like the poison of a serpent. They are like the deaf adder that stoppeth her ear, which will not hearken to the voice of charmers, charming never so wisely. So, one of those crazy moments overseas, we went to a snake show. I was interested in seeing snakes from a safe distance, and it wasn't really that safe because our pastor brother Jacob was as close as the closest one, which is too close because there was no fence, anything like that. And so we had, among many things, they had a boa that was in a box. He said, we're not going to do anything with the boa today because the boa is molting. And so there's a time that a snake goes through where it's actually shedding its skin. And so what I was reading about is that their senses don't work very well during that time. And they're very aggravated. And they don't like anybody to be touching them, doing anything around them. And so this person it was his selected job to be playing with snakes, said, yeah, we won't be doing this today because this one is molting and is not good to mess with them when they're molting. And so this is what David is talking about. They are like the deaf adder that stoppeth her ear, which will not hearken to the voice of charmers, charming never so wisely. And so you kind of see I've seen it in person, but you see it on TV where they open up a basket and a cobra comes out and they play the flute thing and whatever, or recorder, or whatever instrument it is. And the snake will do whatever it is, and it's kind of going along where the top of the basket is, and it's moving its head around and everything. So a snake that doesn't hear and doesn't see, is not going to do that. It's going to completely disregard what that person is doing and probably end up attacking them. And so this is what David is asking, that their teeth be broken in their mouth, break out the great teeth of the young lion. So he's saying, make them ineffective. So a snake that can't bite you, what can it do? Unless it's a constrictor, which there's only a few of those, not all of them. Probably can't do much. What about a lion that doesn't have any teeth? We talked about the lion's den. What about Daniel in the lion's den, where the mouths of the lions were closed? They'll scratch you. Give you some good scratches for sure. But what he's asking here, David is saying, take their power away. Let them melt away as waters which run continually. So when you think about that also, waters run continually. When you turn on the faucet, where's that water go? If you don't catch it, it's gone. And so he's saying, let that melt away just like that water that's gone, that you're never going to see again. When he bendeth his bow to shoot his arrows, let them be as cut in pieces. So I don't know if you know this much about a bow, but a bow has a lot of energy in it. And so you take a piece of wood or metal or whatever it is, and then you stretch the bowstring on there. And even modern day bows, if you were going to leave them in your car, like in the temperatures you have today, they can delaminate. So when you pull back on that string, next thing you know, things are all going to start flying apart because of how it's made. And so that can happen also if you have an arrow that wasn't made correctly. Back in the days of the settlers and all that, they were made out of wood. And so if you can imagine a wooden arrow and how fragile it is if there's something wrong with it, and you're putting all that energy behind it. And I've heard stories about people shooting a crossbow and something would break and that bolt would just go right through their arm. And so definitely not intended, but that's what David is wishing here. So he's not talking about generalities. Lord, let my enemies stumble. He's not saying that at all. He's being very specific about all the things that he's concerned about, that they would completely fail. A snail that melteth, let every one of them pass away, like the untimely birth of a woman that may not see the sun. Before your pots can feel the thorns, he shall take them away as with a whirlwind, both living and in his wrath. So have you ever tried to set thorns on fire? Have you done that, Brother Jacob, before from your stuff? So what do you know about thorns? Do you know much about thorns? They can grab on you. So Dad really liked for us to go rabbit hunting. Rabbits like to hide in the thorns because that's the safe place from predators. And so we went one time rabbit hunting the first time. Dad said, I'm going to show you how to do this. You go there, you jump up and down on a tree and jump around on this and that, and rabbit would jump out. And try to shoot the rabbit if you're fast. You got to be really fast to do it and accurate. So he said, okay, I showed you how to do it this first time. Now from now on, you guys are going to do it. Well, I was too dumb to know at the time. Dad had this jacket, this known as like a briar jacket. He also had some pants, the same thing. We didn't have that. So when we went to go in there into the thorns and briars, we would try to go to the outside of it. Dad's like, yeah, no, get in there like I showed you. Go in there, get in there. So we'd finally go do it. And sure enough, rabbit would come out, and we'd usually come out with wearing some of those thorns that we were into. But there's a unique thing about thorns, and I didn't really think about it, is when you try to burn thorns, if you were try to gather thorns up into a big group of thorns, you're not going to be able to compact it very much, right? I mean, you could try to do it, but you probably wouldn't try to do it. You'd probably just try to just cut it at the root and drag it over and whatever, set on fire. Well, because there's so much air in there and the space in between, apparently when a thorn burns, it just burns up really fast. And so it burns up. It's not like burning hickory or oak or whatever else you might have seen for a campfire, or even pine. It just goes. It just goes up quickly. And so what he's saying here is, before your pots can feel the thorns, he shall take them away as with a whirlwind. So he's saying you can set them on fire, and the fire's there, but the fire's gone so fast, it doesn't cook the food. There's nothing there. There's no use of it. And so he's giving several examples here about how to make his enemies ineffective. The righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance, the blood of the wicked. So here he's acknowledging that for those that are followers of God that are righteous, they will see the day when the Lord pays those others, the wicked people, back, when he judges them for all their sins. So in the meantime, make them ineffective. Is what he's asking for, which is very good. Okay, so we're going to skip over from 59 and 60 to 61, which is actually the one I spent the most time on. Okay. This is the one from our printed material. And in this one, this is where David is actually leaving Jerusalem because his son Absalom is against him and is actually attempting a coup. So would someone like to read 61, all 8 verses. Thank you, Sister Helen. Appreciate it. So in this example, David's in trouble. I don't know if that's the topic of half of David's Psalms, but it could be, because he's in trouble a lot of times. Here he's the king of Israel, but his son Absalom is deciding to rebel against him and was actually attempting a coup, which is an illegal and overt attempt by a military organization or other government leads to unseat an incumbent leadership. And so I looked this up because I was really curious. Like, you hear about a coup here and there on the news in other countries, South America, whatever. There's hundreds and hundreds of coups. And if you look in the Bible, there's overthrows of governments that happen. So this is a common thing. So David isn't concerned about something that happens rarely. He's concerned about something that happens all the time, and it's very real that Absalom is uniting some of the country with him against David. So David prays. He begins by asking God to hear him. And I guess the reminder there is the Lord isn't deaf concerning when we ask for help. It's not a molten image or an idol that is just a piece of wood or a piece of gold or whatever it is. We have a living God, a God that is above all others, that knows us, that looks at us as his children. And we say, hear us, hear my cry, O God. He's listening. Just even that by itself is amazing to me, that the creator of everything, the creator of the world, the creator of the earth, the creator of every single thing we see, listens to me, listens to my prayer when I ask for help. It says he's crying as he's appealing to him. And so why is that the case? But think about where David is. So David was in Jerusalem. You remember back when we studied about David, David was the king that united all the Hebrews. He's also the one that captured Jerusalem and made that the capital city for all of the Hebrews. And the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant, everything was also moved there. So that is, even until today, that is one of the most beloved places of the Hebrews. If the Hebrews are not in Israel, they want to be in Israel. If they're in Israel, they want to be in Jerusalem. I just spoke to somebody Friday that had visited Israel. And he said you can't imagine how beautiful Jerusalem is and how beautiful the country is. And someday I hope to see it. But if he felt that way about it, and other people felt that way about it, can you imagine how David felt about it? So David was so strongly connected to Israel and to Jerusalem, for him to be put out and to more or less be on the run again, just like he was before, was a completely sad state for him. And it's just another reminder that we need to remember that when we pray to the Lord, that we need to acknowledge who He is. We acknowledge that He's our master, and we need to put our trust in Him. When we do all the things He wants us to do, He's happy with us. Sometimes we forget that too. When we follow the Lord's commandments, He's happy with us. The Lord has emotions. We see where the Lord's angry. We see where the Lord is frustrated, but He's also happy when we do what we're supposed to do. And this is what David is doing here. Another thing is God hears our prayers no matter where we are. We don't have to be here at church for the Lord to hear our prayers. We don't have to pray to somebody else who's going to take our prayers to the Lord for us. We don't have to follow some other process. When we're saved, we have a relationship with Jesus. We have a relationship with God, and we pray directly to them. And so we can do it from our car, if we're at our job, if we're walking around somewhere, just anywhere we are, where we're experiencing the problems that we're having. We can pray right from there, and that's exactly what David did. And the reason we can pray anywhere is because God is everywhere. Is there any place that you can go that God can't hear you? That He doesn't have knowledge about or awareness about? So we don't have to go to any specific place. We just, right there where we have our burden, give it to the Lord. Don't wait. Well, I'm going to wait until later when I'm doing this, or wait until I'm doing that. It doesn't seem like David did that too much. David had a routine where he pretty much got up in the morning, started singing, went to the temple, all those things. It was his first priority. And so for us, the Lord does hear our prayers, and He is everywhere, and so it's really up to us to engage in that trust in Him by sharing with Him all of our challenges, our issues, asking for forgiveness of our sins, all the things that He wants us to do. David's situation is really difficult here because he doesn't have all the support that a king would have as he's running for his life. And so he's most desperately in need of support. And so David, as he always does, goes to the Lord in prayer and singing. Can you imagine facing some of the biggest challenges ever and singing to the Lord and praising the Lord? But that's exactly what David did. And he did it in front of everybody. He didn't do it, give me a minute, I got to go sing. He did it in front of everybody. He encouraged everybody to join in with him. That's why it's all written down. He talked about his heart being overwhelmed. Overwhelming troubles are the ones that sweep over us, just like the ocean sweeps over the sand. You ever stand there and see the water comes up? You think, oh, this is so nice. If you're on vacation and you're on the beach, you probably think that's pretty nice. But what if you see those waves crashing on the rocks and you're in a ship that just shipwrecked and you're in the water and you're facing imminent death if you don't have some salvation or someone to save you? That's exactly the situation that David's talking about, is that his heart is overwhelmed because when the crashing waves happen, when do they stop? They don't stop. You ever seen waves stop? I haven't seen waves stop. I've seen things calm down, but I haven't seen them stop. We can feel hopeless and helpless to fight against overwhelming troubles by ourselves. And here's where David is telling God that he recognizes troubles are more than he can handle himself. And he talks about going for the rock that is higher than I. So when you're in the water and you see rocks, you might see the rocks that are in the water. You might see the rocks that are a little bit above the water. But you also see that rock that's a lot higher, that's in the dry, in the stable place. That's where you want to be. And if you're drowning, that's definitely where you want to be. And so that's what David is asking here. He's asking the Lord for his help. He's seeking God. He's asking the Lord for his help, and then he's following him. And that's what the Lord wants us to do. That's why this is written for us too, that we can follow the example. So, okay, that's the end for today. Is it time for the food yet, Brother Jacob? Uh-oh.